Dame Ketchell is working with, he's a development manager for the New York Tree Trust, a joint program of the New York City Department of Parks and Rec and the City Parks Foundation. It was set up in 1994 to preserve, protect, and enhance New York City street, park, and forest trees. And he's built a successful public-private partnerships that has led to innovations in street tree planting and advances in tree preservation. And we were excited to hear, we want to hear sort of how you do it. How can we build these partnerships? He's spearheading the revival of the Great Trees program and actively promotes public awareness on urban forest conservation stewardship. And he's a seasoned forester. I thought that was a good way of putting it. Parks Department and an ISA certified arborist municipal specialist. So it's my pleasure to present James and let him talk on behalf of LEAF, GEO, or Green Infrastructure on Ontario. Again, the last in our series, and hopefully people have signed up, and it's yours. Thanks.
All right, have we unmuted me?
Is
that better? Can you hear me? Yeah. All right, good. All right, so thank you. Thanks, Sandy. Thanks, Amory. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's wonderful to be up here from Brooklyn, New York, and I'm the development manager for the New York Tree Trust, and I think in that title it's maybe a little misleading. It makes me sound like purely a professional fundraiser, which in part I am, but my education is not in that. So I'll take just a couple minutes to explain to you how I ended up doing what I'm doing. I think that'll give you some lens to look through. So also, Sandy mentioned that this is the last of the New York lecture series. So you've heard my boss, his boss, and his boss speak. And so now you've got me. So
And on a high note.
yeah, exactly. So since I was a kid, I enjoyed being outside. I grew up in Newtown, Connecticut. All right, about an hour and a half outside of New York City. Pretty rural, lots of cows, lots of trees. Camping with the Boy Scouts every month of the year, even in the cold. So I'm not bothered by that here at all. And in all of this immersion in nature, I really found that I enjoyed myself. Makes sense. Kid, really dirty at the end of the day. Mom saying, hose yourself off before you come in the house. That sort of thing. And so I don't think it was a big surprise to anyone when I finished high school and went on to study environmental and forest biology at SUNY ESF in Syracuse. So when I got there, I thought, this is 2002. It's just after the new millennium. We've got plant biotechnology is really sexy. It would be really cool to make the next golden rice and feed the world, or make some disease-resistant American chestnut. How cool would that be? And after about a year in school, I realized that the lab was not the place for me. People were far more interesting than me by myself and a petri dish. So I sort of retooled and took a lot of these sort of nature interpretation classes, a lot of these, really core, good, environmental, forestry, forest pathology, all these classes, and got a really excellent, I have to say, I'm lucky, I got really excellent education, and, parlayed that into an internship at an arboretum, which turned into, at the end of the summer, they asked me to stay on and do another internship because our director of education just left and we need someone to teach classes through the fall. And so that ended up being my first job after I finished university. And I found myself teaching arboriculture classes in the evening to green industry professionals, folks who cut grass and prune shrubs, and folks were interested in learning more, but were working during the day. So this started to open me up to this whole new world of the green industry and green professionals. And while I was at that Arboretum in Bartlett, I started going to these meetings of the Connecticut Urban Forestry Council. And I thought, oh, wow, this is really interesting. And, you know, sort of like early 20s guy staying in sort of quiet Connecticut. Urban forestry sounds really appealing, and it's really appealing because it can get me to New York City. Right? Like, there's a lot of cool stuff going on. So it turns out this all pretty much coincided with then Mayor Bloomberg's launch of Plan NYC 2030. Part of that was Million Trees NYC, and a bunch of people got hired, everybody included. So that's sort of how I ended up doing urban forestry from just like a dirty kid outside. So important to note, I think also I can do this, though I prefer not to. There's a shelf life on climbing trees and doing tree work like that, and I don't need to fall out of a tree. So I've done this. It was amazing, very cool. I'm not doing that on a daily basis. So what am I doing now? At the beginning of 2013, I started as the development manager of the New York Tree Trust. And important to note that just because you're a manager doesn't mean there's anybody for you to manage. It was the New York Tree Trust. All right, just me, with support from New York City Parks and part of the City Parks Foundation, and sort of started onto this whole new thing, right? The Tree Trust had been around since '94, but for about 2 years before I jumped in, there wasn't anybody in charge of it, just sort of sitting there, not doing anything. So what an amazing opportunity to take something and make it my own. So a lot of what we do is elevating the care of trees in neighborhoods. All right, we've realized that this neighborhood scale streetscape improvement is really the level that we need to be working at. So what I think I'll do while I'm speaking, I'll give you some examples of projects we are working on or have worked on, and I'll try to give you the background and how we made that happen. So maybe you can take that sort of series of events and apply it to what's going on here in Toronto. So one of the big projects that we started right away was this Lower East Side Greening Acceleration Program. You may be familiar with the States as kind of a litigious society. They love to sue people. And you know, whenever there's an opportunity, there's some community group suing some company and trying to get some money to fix whatever problem they caused. So in this case, Consolidated Edison, Con Ed, they expanded their East 14th Street power station, their power plant, right? So they've got trucks and all kinds of problems, and the community was upset. So to shut up the community, Con Ed created this fund of about $8 million to do neighborhood greening programs to improve the environment for folks in the neighborhood. So, settlement funds, it's a great source for us to ask for money from. So what we did is we wrote this grant to improve the streetscape in this neighborhood. So you can see we're working within a half mile of this Con Ed facility. It would be in the upper right here, just above that yellow area there. And what it entailed was working with the community, talking to them and saying, what kind of things in your neighborhood do you want to make it look more beautiful? All right, and so we were able to take funds from the New York City Parks Department to plant new trees because people wanted new trees. Something else they wanted was tree guards. So the little metal railing, three-sided railing around the tree pit to keep dogs from going in there, keep people from putting trash in there. And Parks is happy because it improves the quality of tree. The trees look better. And we engaged community volunteers to do some plantings, planting daffodil bulbs and liriape in there. So, we took the first phase one, which is in the green there, about $150,000 from that settlement fund, about $150,000 in tree planting, put it together, and bingo, we got that. The red area is phase two that we got funded for, which was about $300,000 of settlement funds. So this is sort of before sort of average street tree going on here with a bike around it and really not like lovely garbage. So this is really not ideal for a tree or anyone else. You've got people traipsing through that tree bed. And here we are during the project. So folks engaged in the community, improving things, making it look a lot nicer. Those tree guards were made by a local Brooklyn, actually, it's an interesting story. About a year before we did this project, I had presented at a conference in Brooklyn about folks taking responsibility for trees in their neighborhoods. And there was this guy, Tom, who was like, yeah, I build these tree guards on my block, they look awesome. And so I approached him and said, would you consider building some tree guards for us? It was an awesome opportunity for him to work with folks in his neighborhood with an existing design that we really liked and put together a lower cost tree guard here. Oh, by the way, if you have any like super pressing questions as I'm going through, don't hesitate to put up your hand. All right. So here's one of the folks who volunteered to plant liriape and daffodil bulbs. Yeah.
How were you able to engage the community to do this?
Perfect. So what we did is we said, we are the Tree Trust. We're not like the super experts on what's going on in this neighborhood. So we looked for existing organizations who did environmentally minded work. All right. This would be like, there's a group through the fire department. There would be like teenagers who go to the firehouse who, like, it's like an after school kind of thing where they do things for the neighborhood. They volunteer at like the food pantry and that kind of thing. We said, well, this seems like a group of folks who would want to do a neighborhood beautification project because they care about where they live, they're invested. We were super lucky in this neighborhood that just south of here is the Lower East Side Ecology Center. And we were able to partner with them to mobilize a lot of volunteers to do this work. So we were the vehicle to bring funding and resources to a funding and resource poor organization. And they supplied a lot of people, which is what we didn't have. And so we've ended up engaging a few hundred people in doing this project. It's pretty straightforward, but it makes people really realize that there's a tree here on the sidewalk and maybe we need to take care of it. And there's a lot of bars in this neighborhood, so these trees, as you can imagine, get some abuse. So here we are in the spring with the daffodils. And so the idea was that really entire streetscape is improved. Really, like it is making this neighborhood distinct. It's making this different than, say, a block over where there's nothing. And it says to folks just transiting through the neighborhood that this is somewhere where people care about where they live. And this is not a lot of money. Daffodil bulbs and liriape plants. We were able to get a nursery to grow these liriape for less than $1 a piece. And those daffodil bulbs are like 18 cents a piece. So it's a very reasonable project that can be done with volunteer work. So I think one of the key things that you can see in this picture is I think there's a lot of criticism of the Million Trees program because it's, oh, we're just taking care of, we're planting new trees and we're not focusing any resources on existing trees. this ties in all of the forest, all right? Existing trees, new trees, everything's getting this improvement, this treatment. And I think it's this uniform treatment that really pulls this together as one forest rather than new trees and then neglected older existing trees. And having those guards really had some really sort of like unexpected consequences, which are good, I guess. Folks started doing gardening in them. They weren't doing this before. And it was amazing how many tree beds are just people, just all of a sudden there's a tree guard there and they felt like they could come out and connect with the trees in their environment. And what an amazing opportunity to express yourself. You live on the 3rd, 4th floor and you have a studio apartment. You're not doing this in your backyard. You don't have one. This is it. So just sort of like a funding, right? So phase 1 was, matched 50-50 with public funds and grant funds. Phase 2 was more actually grant funds than public funds. So it's about what is it? It's $450,000 of grant funds represented between phase 1 and phase 2. And I was hoping we would have a decision by the time I got up here about phase 3, but not yet. I think we're going to be looking at about $225,000 more from that same fund. So it's scalable. You don't have to bite it all off at once. You do it in phases, and it seems to work out reasonably well. And I can see another municipality buying into supporting a project like this. One of the reasons that I'm able to get matching funds from the city so easily is that I'm saying this is an area where folks are taking care of trees. This is an area where is ripe for tree stewardship by folks who live here. They want trees. If you plant them, they're going to be taken care of better than somewhere else. So I think it's easy for a municipality to say, we're going to put resources where people want it. It makes people happy, and it really enhances the investment that they're making. So one of the things along the same kind of line is the same kind of neighborhood scale streetscape improvement in business improvement districts. You have these here in Toronto, as I understand.
Yes.
Yeah, and you also call them BIDs?
Yes.
BIA?
BIAs.
BIA, okay. So, and I think that maybe the first BIA was in the 70s, all right?
Yes.
So,
Yes, that's what it
yeah,
was.
yeah. So it was around the same time that happened in New York City. So, the first one actually was in Brooklyn, the Fulton Malls. It's kind of interesting. The wide landscaped areas in the middle of Fulton Street. So early on, when I started taking over as the development manager for the New York Tree Trust, I sort of had to look and see where is there money that people want to spend. And so our BIDs, business improvement districts, they collect, I think it's very similar to you. There's like basically a special tax for property owners in a certain geographic area, and that money goes to fund the BID. And that BID, it's their responsibility for making that neighborhood or that street better, right? Often we see it in the city, in New York City, as improved sanitation or graffiti removal or security or like a cohesive marketing campaign about come to Sunnyside, Queens. It's the place to, come to the park and eat and go see a movie afterwards. So each BID wants to make their neighborhood special and different. And so I started to reach out to these different business improvement districts. And what I realized is that they knew what they wanted, but they didn't know how to get it. And so we were able to bring this subject matter expertise of trees and streetscape improvement to them in a way that they understood what the outcome was going to be without getting mired in on the details of how it's going to get done. So I'll give you an example. This is a larger scale But I'm working with big business improvement districts that are huge and also that are like a one-man band. So it works sort of at any scale. So one of the projects I'm working on now is with the Hudson Square connection. The Hudson Square neighborhood is in Manhattan, south of Houston, west of 6th Avenue, north of Canal Street. The Holland Tunnel is right there, and that's the tunnel that goes to New Jersey. It's a neighborhood that is plagued with incredible traffic, and the neighborhood really carries this heavy burden of an immense amount of traffic going to other parts of the city that come right through here. In 2009, the Business Improvement District of Hudson Square connection was created. I gotta go to my notes for some of the details here. All right. Hudson Square Connection is working to transform the neighborhood into a major creative hub, home to over 40,000 people working in advertising, design, media, communications, and other cutting-edge businesses. So these are really forward-thinking, sort of free-thinking folks working in these industries that are about changing. Well, the neighborhood was all these sort of like big warehousey kind of buildings that were being changed into landscapes, architects' offices and all that sort of thing. And there wasn't really anything special that stood out about the neighborhood. Well, they put together a green infrastructure program as part of their $27 million Streetscape master plan. Oh my God, $27 million, like that's more than I can think about. Like I know what $100 looks like. I know what $1 million looks like, but $27 million over 5 years, like I'm not sure what that really looks like in terms of just this neighborhood. So part of it was street trees. They want more street trees. Okay, simple. Parks has street trees, we'll plant it. Well, then they wanted bigger street trees. All right, you're planting a 2.5 to 3 inch caliber. We want 3.5 inch. Okay, well, what are you going to do to take care of those trees? So they unveiled their Streetscape master plan, and as a result of that, they came up with this, what we're calling the Hudson Square Standard. So we're looking at street trees planted in 5 foot by 10 foot standard, excavated down to 2 feet tree bed, with a tree guard around it, with permeable pavement set atop structural soil, in between and adjacent to these newly planted trees. And I never thought that urban forestry would have me sort of like brokering deals between the Department of Transportation and the Parks Department, but here I am almost 2 years ago in a room at Department of Transportation headquarters with their chief of staff and some lawyer and some people from the Business Improvement District and the head of the Public Design Commission, and saying like, this is what we need to do, and we need to do it because it's the best thing for trees and for New York City. And I got them on board. It certainly wasn't just me, but it was pretty remarkable. The real sticking point, I think, for this was getting Department of Transportation to realize that those permeable pavers are part of the tree bed and are the jurisdiction of the Parks Department. They are not the jurisdiction of the Department of Transportation. It's a tree health issue. And I'm not going to lie, it was a huge help that the landscape architecture firm who did a lot of the work happened to be one of the principals of that, happened to be head of the Public Design Commission. So it definitely helped to move things forward. Yeah.
What would one of these tree units with that amount of permeable pavement around it, what would one of those be?
So we've got, call it about $6 grand. All right. Of course, that's New York City cost, public prevailing wage being paid along the way. So that street tree planting to the Parks Department costs about $2,200. So that,
Is the city contracted out or?
yes. Yeah, so for a 3.5-inch tree, street tree being planted in that 5x10 tree bed, it's about $2,200. And that is excavation, site preparation, planting of the tree, and 2-year guarantee that includes watering and weeding for the first 2 seasons that it's in the ground, first 2 summers. So it seems like a lot, but you get a lot for it. So think about this, the structural soil and permeable pavers with everything installed. That ends up being about, I think it's like $56 a square foot. And so you're excavated down about 2.5 or 3 feet, depending on each location, filled in with your structural soil. It's reasonably close to the CU soil with the aggregate that's on the smaller side. I know up here sometimes you use a structural soil with a lot bigger aggregate. It's just not something that we have a lot of experience doing. So this is what's I think interesting to point out about this is that the city is paying for the tree and that dirt spot around it, and the business improvement district is paying for everything around it. So it's truly this partnership.
Yes, how old do you expect these trees to live?
So I would expect these trees to actually live a lot longer than they normally would. We're planting a reasonable complement of trees: Kentucky coffee tree, hackberry, some oaks. So I would expect that this is going to be closer to like an 80-year tree rather than like a 30-year tree, which is probably what it would be if it was just in that concrete coffin. Yeah.
I don't know of any place in Toronto that actually is experimenting with permeable pavers as a city project. The only argument I've ever heard, the only discussion I've ever heard about it is how raised the argument that these don't last very well, the technology's moving or whatever. How are they holding up?
So we put in the first ones last fall. They look awesome today. Hudson Square is Manhattan. It is a super high volume of pedestrian traffic. I'll show you an installation of some beautiful benefits. I think we're all here so we understand that this is why we do it. So this is, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I'll get to that part in a little bit, yeah.
They have been installed in some locations. The issue has been, my question to you, is who maintains those permeable pavers? Because within a year, we have them completely filled with weeds. If it's not vacuum swept,
Yeah.
debris goes in and the weed seeds flow in.
So this is the key to a project like this. The Business Improvement District actually has taken on maintenance responsibility for this moving forward. Part of what bids typically do is they provide supplemental sanitation. So it's easy enough to have their crew go and do the vacuum sweeping and replenishment of that aggregate in between the pavers, annually if necessary. So we actually, Unilock is the one who does the paver, and we work with them pretty closely to develop a management protocol and a care guide moving forward to make sure that everything's done right. I think that was really the key part that Department of Transportation was concerned about, because they can't even keep a concrete sidewalk. They don't have the staff to do something like this. So this is really cool because at the beginning of this project, as I was reaching out to business improvement districts, I sort of got this handed to me. This was not one of the first fish I was going to go after. The senior forester from Manhattan at the time had just given birth and was out on maternity leave. And there were two foresters who worked underneath her. One of them was already on maternity leave, And another one had gone to build a fish passage in the Bronx somewhere. So because I started out my career with parks doing street tree planting in Manhattan, someone in the office said, James, do you think you could take this on? And so I started in February of 2013 with this map of potential tree planting locations, and those are my notes on it. Of like, oh, there's a, I think there's a bike something there, and there's no space there, and oh, there's an empty tree pit over here, and there's a subway grate in the way, we can't put a tree here. So this really rough assessment on a neighborhood basis helped us zero in on exactly the blocks we could work on. We ended up with these really beautiful site plans. And so the process is such that we identify these locations, put down this little sticker, let people know what's going on, what's on its way. This is sort of like the highlights reel, right? So I think everybody likes this stuff. So, bust up the concrete, excavate it out, excavate that soil out. So this is Varick Street, and that's a subway grate that you see. Varick Street is like 8th Avenue later on, and the subway runs right underneath the road, right under the street. But we're able to plant trees off the curb in the middle of the sidewalk here, in a place where trees otherwise wouldn't have been able to be. It's pretty remarkable. And then caution tape and all of that. And so here you see the soil tree beds with the structural soil sort of sections in between. That's about 10 foot of tree bed, about 15 foot of structural soil, and this is the entire length of the block. There's also a steam pipe somewhere closer to the subway vent over here. It's an area where I'm 100% sure a forester went by and said, we can't plant trees there, there's too much infrastructure. Well, there's stuff there, but there's the baby going in. And it's a hackberry. So a little before and after. So this is, you can see, this is a major improvement to this block. It was really, aside from this building being incredibly ugly, and just being this terrible, sort of dull brown, this sort of concrete canyon that you used to walk through, and now you have this like really pleasant, broken up by trees. In the summer, it's really nice. It's a hotel there. They've planted flowers in the tree bed. It's like, oh, wow, this is a place I want to come and do business and work.
I'm just wondering why you chose to go with such a large caliber tree to plant. Like a 3.5-inch caliber seems like a pretty large tree to stick in a 5 by 10 area, as opposed to like a 50 or 60.
So the street tree planting standard is 2.5 to 3-inch caliper for New York City. That's the standard. The Business Improvement District asked that because they were, investing, money in these trees, that they maybe get a bigger tree, and so 3.5 is not uncommon for the city to plant in certain projects. The root ball is sufficiently, there's enough space in a 5-foot pit for a 42-inch. You get 60 inches of tree bed and a 42-inch, root ball. It fits in just fine. And when you think about a hackberry or something else, whether you planted it 2-inch or at 4-inch, it's going to grow up to be the same size if you're doing it right.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. So, and these are actually, they caught us, they asked for that after the first season of planting. So this is actually just a 2.5-inch tree. They said, oh, we love it, it's so nice, but do you think next time we could get a bigger tree? Sure, why not? So, of course, everybody's branded. These trees are all part of you know, the 1 Million Trees campaign, so I'm 1 in a million. The Business Improvement District has its own little tag that they hang in each tree as well, that has little facts about how trees are useful and helpful, and I think that serves to engage folks. You know, signage is something that's a component to most of these projects that we do. It's community education, it's folks are naturally curious about what's going on. So
James,
yes.
sorry, do bike racks come in later? Is there a, I mean, even in those pictures, I can see a determined cyclist could still figure out a way to chain up their bike.
Well, what's nice, I mean, at least they're going to chain it to the tree guard, not the tree.
They're tall enough for that?
They're 18 inches, so you can do it. You know, people do it pretty regularly. Department of Transportation has a standard bike rack, and as part of this, each place where we're doing this work, we're assessing if it's appropriate, and we pour the footing, and they come out later and put it in.
Okay, that was what I wanted.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, bike racks and city bench, the benches that they use as well. And, oh, there's a second sidewalk underneath there. The joy of planting trees in a very urban area is like ridiculous. So those are some of these neighborhood scale streetscape projects that we're doing. You know, I'm working with another business improvement district. It's worth mentioning because maybe this is close to a scale that some of you may want to start out with. There's this business improvement district in Sunnyside, Queens. It's an old neighborhood. It's really residential. They've got Queens Boulevard and Greenpoint Avenue. They're like the two commercial districts. There's an independent movie theater. There's family-owned sort of smaller businesses. Their business improvement district is Rachel, and she's one person. She does an amazing job. And so what we've been doing is Queens Boulevard is known as the Boulevard of Death because people drive so crazy on it, and it's a major pedestrian challenge, and it goes right through their district. And so one of the things that we know is that street trees help calm traffic, makes the pedestrians feel safer so that they can walk on the sidewalk and spend their money and live in the neighborhood. So it's a real priority for them to plant as many trees along Queens Boulevard as possible. So I worked with Rachel to do a comprehensive neighborhood survey, of this like 15 blocks, and each season we've picked out 3 or 4 blocks that we're going to work on, and each fall and each spring I go out with her and a ton of people from the community, and we do neighborhood cleanup, and we're out putting mulch in tree beds, putting daffodil bulbs, putting new paint on tree guards, doing all of these things to make people more tree aware and to care for those new trees that the Parks Department is planting as well. So that's like another scale of this kind of project. It's a different amount of money. It's maybe 15 or 30 grand, at most a year, and probably only about half of that is getting paid for by the Business Improvement District. The other half is in money from the Parks Department to plant new trees and such. So having that ability to scale at this kind of a project, I think, is really useful.
I'm going to organize this question around the question of money and services in regards to community. But you also said that you could match money with the city. So how much is the city set aside for these projects? What can you use it for? And are you using the community because you can't pay for staff, or because but it sounds like you want to use the community.
Absolutely.
That's really built into what you do.
Absolutely. Engaging communities in neighborhoods where we're doing work is key to project success. It is so important for folks to see the value in trees in their neighborhood. And it's a fantastic way to get people engaged in doing all of these other sort of like advocacy components of what we want them to do. We want neighborhoods to ask our government to spend more money on things we want them to do. But you can't get there until you get people connected to the tree that's in front of their home or business. So getting folks to pick up the garbage out of the tree bed and water that tree in the summertime or plant some flowers, it sets you up for success. So that concludes the question. The money that I'm using to match with private funds from these grants and such, I'm asking every time I want to do that. You know, New York City is, in a way blessed with a lot of funds for planting trees. And so it's easy for me to say to Matt, some of you may have been here for Matt Stevens' talk, it's easy for me to go like this and say, hey Matt, because he's literally like 2 desks behind me, Matt, I've got this project that I really want to do on the Lower East Side. You know that we've got community engagement. You know that these trees are going to be taken care of. You're planting 600 trees in Manhattan this season anyway. Can we say 40 or 50 of them are going to go in this neighborhood? And I mean, it's a no-brainer for him. It's like, of course. We know these trees are going to be taken care of. Why wouldn't I want to? It's making the city look smarter. At the same time, it's making actual improvement. So that's that component. So I want to touch a little bit on, Amory gave a fantastic presentation earlier today about a project that he worked on over the summer for the Tree Trust. It's about the Great Trees of New York. It's a program where in 1985, about 120 trees were identified by communities as great. All right, these are historically or botanically significant trees for folks in their neighborhoods. And so I'll just give you, I'm going to give you the boiled down version. If you have questions about this, ask Amory. He's the expert now. This was a great tree. This is a forestry fail. All right, we don't want trees to end up like this until they absolutely have to. So what can we do to keep this from happening? One of the trees that I'll talk about is Washington Square Park, English elm. All right, it's a fantastic tree that had major issues. All right, it's English elm in Washington Square Park. Washington Square Park is like the iconic Manhattan right by NYU. It's got the arch, it's got the fountain, it's got the chessboards, it's got the drug dealers, it's got everything. You think about the village, it's there. And so there's this one particular tree, Hangman's Elm. It predates the park. It lived there long before there was a grid around it. It is a pretty remarkable tree. And we identified it as, it was identified as a great tree of New York City. Great. Well, what the hell does that mean? It's great. Oh, great. So this tree is a tree that needed help. All right. It was a tree that had issues, and I think that, there's a lot of work to be done in any municipality, and it's easy just to say, leave it alone or cut it down. All right, I mean, those are like the 2 easiest decisions to make. Reality is, in our work culture, we can do a lot of things in between. So we took a look at this tree and had an independent arborist come in and do an assessment. And we sort of mapped all of its issues and made a plan. We identified all of the defects, and there were a lot, and systematically went through and said, all right, these are the corrective procedures we need to do. We need to do a crown reduction on this. We need to remove this limb. This is not something that the Parks Department is prepared to do. This is far more invested in one tree, than Parks is capable of doing. So this all got paid for through private funds that I raised. So this is, work to preserve this really unique tree. So we mapped out all of its defects and did a big crown reduction and did some soil treatments, and you can probably see where in the upper right part, we did a major, kind of cut off the top, maybe 10% of the tree to reduce the weight on all of these defects. Yeah.
I have a quick question about the great trees.
Mhm.
Were they pre-identified, or is that something that you identified in the process of deciding to put effort into this tree?
In the 80s, there was a great tree hunt, and this was sort of indicative of the time. There was a commissioner of the Parks Department who was a little odd and liked to identify things that were outliers. And so these trees were nominated by folks in the neighborhood, and I may not think that some of them at the time were great, but actually the ones that are left I think are all pretty great. So pre-identified list of trees that I was working from. I should mention that when it was first identified there was about 120. In 96 there were 107, and Amory just did a inventory over the summer, and there are 66. So I think somebody dropped the ball somewhere between then and now. But the point is we're doing it right at this point. So what are we doing to preserve these trees physically? Right, these trees are not going to stand there forever. And, at some point, the risk to having this tree growing over this entrance to the park, where a branch would probably kill a pile of babies or something, because that's what we have to prepare for. I think at some point this tree is going to have to go. All right, like all trees, right? Phoenix helix, 99% of all trees have to die to get to a mature forest. I mean, this is our reality. Trees have a limited lifespan, so we can preserve this tree in perpetuity through preserving its genetics. So what have we done? We've decided to clone the great trees. So 2008, 2009, we took cuttings of a number of these great trees, sent them out to Shittel's Nursery, Oregon, and had them cloned. All right, so this is just sort of like the quick and dirty of, you take your parent tree, you take a branch, right, cutting off of that tree, and you can either graft it onto roots of the same species or genus in some case, or you can just directly root that out in a greenhouse. So that's the process we're going through for a number of these trees. I think one of these iconic trees is the Parsons Weeping Beech. Weeping Beech Park got its name from this tree, and it's not there anymore. And we're lucky that we were able to take cuttings off of the sprouts off of the stump. And now we have the new tree. The story behind this is supposedly it was the first weeping beech brought to North America in a clay pot, from Europe somewhere. So the story that engages and has really captured folks in the neighborhood who say, oh, Weeping Beech Park, of course it's from the Weeping Beech, that's not there anymore. So the hope is that when this baby gets big enough, she's going to go back to where that mother tree was. Another sort of like best of reel here. So here are a bunch of the clones, all ready to rock and roll, all little cute ones. This would have been probably spring 2010. Beautiful big sky country. A number of different trees that we've got in the pipeline. That is a Japanese maple there, and the park where that came from was a nursery. It's one of the first nurseries in the U.S. and was actually one of the first nurseries to accept seeds and seedlings from Japan. And this is one of the places where Japanese maples were first distributed in North America. So potentially the parent tree of this is one of the originals. So it's pretty cool. And this was Parsons, one of Parsons' selections here. So this is from this past fall. They're finally big enough, we'll bring them back. This is a tree in the Bronx. Right? This is a tree that was identified by the neighborhood as significant to them and important. And there's a, bingo, we've got a nice little baby, a little clone going on there. So this project is important for the city, but I think it's also important for these communities to see that their trees fit into this larger context of this forest that we have. The best of here. That's we actually got Central Park Conservancy to get in on the action, and so they're a huge conservancy that raises a ton of money, and they take care of Central Park. And people can think that they're exclusive, but we've got trees there too. So the trees don't know the property lines; they don't care. This is a little bit of a success story, I think. This is ash tree up in Van Cortlandt Park. This is enormous, one of, if not the largest of its kind in the city. And so this was cloned, and there she is growing in the field out in Oregon. And here she is this past spring in front of the mother tree. And we all planted another one, but that's a willow. The same event, we planted, this was the one that we all posed around. Point being, we're preserving these trees. And what I think is important, especially in the case of this ash, is that we've retained some of this cloned tree out in Oregon, where hopefully, at some point, it may be part of bringing ash back, post EAB. We'll see where that happens, what happens with that, but the point is it's preserved and it's isolated, which is a nice thing. And I'll sort of end on a preview of what's to come here. Big public-private partnership that we have coming up is the Trees Count 2015 New York City Street Tree Census. All right, this is going to be a huge public engagement opportunity. Every 10 years, the Parks Department counts its street trees. And the first one was 95. The last one was in 2005. This will be the third. We are in major planning stages, and we've got about 650,000 street trees in New York City, and about half of those are going to be counted by volunteers. So we've got a ton of people to get out in their neighborhood and tell us what's going on with trees and sort of what's to come here. So, we've got more than 600,000 trees on our streets. Next year, we're going to be doing this. We're going to be mobilizing thousands of volunteers. It's an amazing opportunity to engage New Yorkers. And so the trick is, this is going to be 3 phases. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is that whenever you are thinking about some urban forestry project in your neighborhood, you have to think about what you're doing today, what you're going to do with what you did today, and what you're going to do a year from now, right? So phase 1 is data collection, right? We've got to get the information about what trees are on the street before we can really do anything. So then data integration. That data is actually going to be put into the forestry management system. That data is going to be the basis of how New York City tracks its work. All right, this is going to be the nuts and bolts of day-to-day operations. And once we get it into the system, we're going to launch an interactive tree care website. Right? This is a place where folks in neighborhoods can go to connect with other stewards, a place where they can go report their tree care activities, a place where they can go to get hooked up with resources to care for their trees. So this is our next phase project, and I'm going to give a little ad here. We're going to be hiring a bunch of people to come down and count trees next year. So if you're interested or qualified, let me know. So. That is our public-private partnership. That is the New York Tree Trust. That's a few of the projects we're working on. And I just want to say thanks. And if there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I think that this this lecture series is a great opportunity, has been a great opportunity for New York to share some of our experiences with you all up here. But I think more importantly, we're building a connection with folks who work and care for trees in urban spaces. And we all need to work together and share our successes, right? Like, I need to be excited about what's working well for you, because I know that in our city, you know, the work that we do is phenomenal, and people outside of our industry don't always recognize that. So I'm happy to be excited for your successes, and I would love for you to be happy about our successes. So,
So we have time till about 5:30 for questions. Some people may have to slip out, for sure.
yeah. So, yeah.
Can you talk a bit about spontaneous vegetation? I read that they don't count the, say for example, Atlantis in New York as part of the census. Can you comment on that?
Sure. So the street tree census is going to count every tree on the street. So whether it's Atlantis or not. For the volunteer, it's getting counted. You know, and we'll just know how many Atlantis there are and where they're at. Yeah, back.
I just have a question. You talked a lot about engaging with existing communities and making improvements where people know what they want already. Is there any, like, does your group or whatever do any work identifying areas that need improvement but maybe don't have representation through local groups?
Yes.
So that you're not just doing the improvements in the areas that are already engaged. You know what I mean?
Yeah, one of the projects that we just wrapped up is Green Western Queens. It's a project in Long Island City and Astoria, sort of western part of Queens, and it's an area that was affected by a blackout, so there were funds made available for community greening initiatives. And so part of that was holding visioning sessions with folks in the neighborhood and deciding what they're interested in doing. So absolutely. I mean, that's a science unto itself, for sure. If that's something you're looking for more information about, I'd be happy to connect you with those folks who can like speak directly to that whole process. It's a little that part of it is a little outside of my experience, but you know, I start off where they sort of say, this is what we want.
Do you have any concerns when you're getting residents to participate in this about like safety and issues of like liability and things like that?
In terms of like if something happens while we're out there?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, we got money for this project because someone sued someone. So, you know, so there's a pretty standard parks waiver that we ask all volunteers to sign that just says you can't sue us, basically. So, you know, like when we're out there, there's, you know, safety vests and traffic control when necessary and that sort of thing.
Do you have a problem of the tree diseases? If you have, how are you going to manage it? Absolutely.
You know, New York City has seen a ton of different pests move through. I think I can give you the skinny on Asian Longhorn Beetle, which is something I think you all have dealt with here. You know, I live in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, which was the neighborhood where ALB was first found in 1996. And as a result, pretty much all of the trees got cut down. And so my neighborhood is almost all trees planted post-2000. And so that in itself is a challenge, but you know, we have to work, and we're lucky that we work very well with our state and federal, you know, authorities. And in the case of Asian Longhorn Beetle, you know, we follow the rules, and just like any other pest or disease, and we sort of have to pick up the pieces from there. Yes?
Are you at all concerned that the communities that would be getting the most benefit from your program might be more affluent and might need it the least?
There is, okay, so that's actually a good question because our current mayor, de Blasio, his big thing is equity and making sure that everybody gets city services, you know, where they're needed. So the tree planting program at the beginning of the Million Trees initiative identified 7 neighborhoods that were called Trees for Public Health Zones. These were neighborhoods that were looked at have low canopy cover, and surprise, surprise, those locations with low canopy cover have high population density, high rates of hospitalization for asthma, and also were neighborhoods that were not affluent. So I think at this point we have about 7-8 years of a track record of specifically targeting those areas that are in need the most from a forestry perspective, rather than the neighborhood who makes the most noise. You know, inherently, there's going to be some inequality in some of the projects that I do. In Hudson Square's a big, high-value neighborhood. Certainly, they have the money to spend. You know, part, though, it's important to note, part of the money that they're spending supports my salary, because I'm not paid by the city. I'm paid by money that I raise, and my time is not all spent there. So my time is also spent out in like East New York, working with neighborhoods that, you know, they don't have the same fiscal resources. Yes.
Have you been able to engage corporate funding? You talked about funds, so can you sort of give us an insight to this private money?
Sure. So some of the money that I raise is grant money made available through these settlement funds. I talked about that. When I sue someone, you have money set up for the neighborhood. The other part of it is some of the money that we're raising to do the tree census is totally just ask a corporation to be involved and they pony up the money. So I think Bloomberg LP is a great example of them saying, we want to come out as a company and do a tree planting or tree care event. We are going to, you know, give you, you know, $30,000 and we're going to come out for the day and you set us up and put us to work.
So who did you say it was, Bloomberg LP?
Yeah.
So Bloomberg.
So it's, you know, so like our former mayor.
Okay.
You know,
that.
Yeah, same connection there.
Gotcha.
But you know, like last year when the Super Bowl was hosted in New York, Jersey, the host committee actually did a major. They did a really cool, high-profile planting project with us, and ended up with $75,000 that I'm using for other projects. You know, that's really making things happen that wouldn't have otherwise happened.
Just a follow-up question. How challenging is it to get corporate money? Because a lot of times, unless it has a national scope project, they don't want it. You're thinking banks, you know, as a target.
Well, you know, I've found that there are a lot of companies who have this corporate responsibility sort of thing written into their own code, you know, written into how they do business.
Right.
And a lot of larger corporations have a charitable foundation that they give funds to. And it's about identifying those foundations whose focus is environmental, but not necessarily just environmental, public health, or sometimes education fits in. You know, it's just about going to a resource. I know for us in New York, the Foundation Center is a fantastic resource where it's their business to connect funders with grantees. Like that's what they do it for free, that's what they do. I don't know if you have a similar resource here, but you might want to look at something like that. And then just asking everybody. I have no problem asking people.
You're getting good at it.
Yeah, I guess. Yes.
My question is more for anyone else in the room who can answer it. What went wrong on Bloor Street? We had a BIA at Fifth Avenue that spent a lot of money on silver-cells and London plane trees with a hideously high mortality rate. And one of my theories was they're doing too much gardening under the trees because they do these elaborate, colorful plantings of annuals every spring. But I don't know, was it the wrong species planted at the wrong time of year, or does anybody here know what happened on Bloor Street?
Does the city want to say anything to this? I'm looking for Peter Simon because he's been at the previous talks. Yeah.
I've seen the BIA.
Peter has actually looked at it, but I don't know if you guys feel confident to comment or.
I assume it was their own contract.
There could be,
I can answer this. Peter,
yeah, there could be multiple reasons. I don't know if Peter's here or not.
Okay, because I got city planning many times. I work in city planning, and I know with plane trees we've lost because of the long, hard winter. They did not well anywhere. I mean, they just had a hard time. But on Bloor Street, there was a big problem with salt. The ones in the grates, the salt would get collected, and so the salt was measured at 7 times the actual salinity you would want to have in a tree pit opening. So there's an issue with the detail itself. But the plantings in the beds and the trees in the pits both have good die-off rate. So it wasn't about taking care of the plants. In fact, watering the plants should have helped flush the salt out.
It's interesting, I'll sort of share our experience post-Superstorm Sandy. I don't know, maybe Jeremy spoke about it. But London Plain was actually, like, in these areas of inundation, they just looked like hell. You know, like some of them just outright never leafed out. Others just looked like hell. And so as a result, I mean, of the 47,000 street trees in the inundation zones from Hurricane Sandy, so I'd say like 6,000 of them are London Plains are being removed or have been removed. So maybe not as tough as we thought it was.
Just on a more cheerful note, I recently noticed some bioswales on the east side of Bay at Wellesley that seem to be thriving after 4 years. Hackberries with stuff like fragrant sumac planted under them. And they're looking really, really nice.
Yes.
I was wondering, do you have like more highlights, real cases on your website where you showcase those projects that have been done today? Just do we want to like go back and look at what they're doing?
Yep, that's in process. I'm working with the Parks New Media, so they're not as fast as I would hope, but they're doing it for nothing, so I'm waiting. Yes?
You didn't speak much about the conflict with the utilities in the sidewalks. Is that a big problem for you? I mean, some of the ones you showed us were quite wide, but you must have a lot of narrower sidewalks where there's
Oh, yeah.
a lot of conflict.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, there's always something underneath the sidewalk. I mean, I can't tell you how many oil lines, gas lines, electric lines, I mean, we've encountered. And it's inevitable, you know, like everywhere a tree gets planted, first a forester goes and takes a look at it. Is this even a possible site just from put a white dot on the curb? Send off the site, have the utilities all marked. Go back with the contractor who's going to plant the tree, look at it and say, is there gas, is there electric, is there sewer, is there water, is there steam? Any of those things are marked. Then you say like, nope, it looks like this is okay, or, you know, there's, in some cases, you know, 10, 15% of those sites you surveyed are void because of, you know, underground conflicts, you know. And then, even then sometimes, you know, open up the sidewalk and you find an old coal chute that goes right into somebody's basement. Or you cut open the sidewalk and you peel up the sidewalk and you're looking into somebody's basement. It's a little terrifying. So it's inevitable. I mean, in New York City, we're planting, you know, like 20,000 street trees a year. So 20,000 holes, you're bound to find something.
I was going to ask, because you have this inventory for next year, and you're getting, I forget how many, half are being done by the communities, and you're a forester, how confident are you of that data when it comes in? And how do you think about that?
So this is one of the...
Good idea?
Yeah, one of these, this is like the... From the beginning of this project, you know, being looked at, it's a priority from our commissioner to engage the communities in which these trees live. And, you know, if you look at it purely from how much does it cost standpoint, collecting the data with volunteers is the same, if not a little bit more, than just hiring a contractor to collect the data. You know, it becomes so much more, the project isn't just about collecting geospatial and attribute data on trees. It's about public engagement and public education. So part of what we're doing in this tree inventory is last time we had about 35 different attributes that you know, were collected for each tree, including like, are there sneakers hanging in the tree? Like, that's not getting used. So we pared it down to about 12, and really of those 12, I'm very confident that we've crafted the questions in ways that are trainable. You can train volunteers to answer those. I think the least confidence of any of them is tree ID. And I feel pretty confident that we're going to have, you know, for that 50% of the inventory that's collected by volunteers, are like, 9 times out of 10, the forester walks up to the tree and the species is correct, we're good. You know, we're not collecting DBH, we're collecting circumference, so there's not going to be a question of somebody using the wrong side of the tape. So that sort of like eliminates some of these problems from before. We're not saying, you know, estimate crown dieback in, you know, increments of 5%. That's too complicated. You know, so we've pared it down to very usable and actionable pieces of information that are accessible to the public. I feel really confident about that.
So after they measure the trees, they put it on this interactive tree map?
So what's going to be super cool is the Tree Trust funded the development of an app that's going to be on your phone or on tablets that you can take out at your local library to do this tree inventory, and it's going to go directly into the system as you go. We're going to be using the tree kit method, which is this rolly wheel from corner to corner. And you know, you're going to say, I'm on this street, I'm starting at this cross street, I'm going to that cross street.